in psychological or mental illnesses or psychological disorders. Okay. So what do you mean when we talk about models? Okay. So models are actually models of abnormality, if you want to say, like they are considered to be, they are called as perspectives or viewpoints. Okay. In science, any viewpoint or any perspective which are used to explain certain conditions, situations, or events are called as models or paradigms. Okay. So each model, whichever viewpoint or perspective or theoretical perspective or model is used to, each model basically spells out the basic assumptions under it, gives order to the field under which this model is being studied, and sets guidelines for investigation. And these different models or viewpoints, they influence what clinicians or investigators or researchers observe a particular behavior, the type of questions they will ask while doing research or while you know doing treatment, the information that they want to see, and how they are going to interpret that information. So how a particular investigator, researcher, or a clinician, or a therapist, or a psychologist is going to observe a particular behavior, type of questions he will ask, the information he will want, and how he is going to interpret that information depends upon which model or which viewpoint or which theoretical perspective that investigator or clinician follows. Okay, so under psychology, I mean abnormal psychology, we have different models of abnormalities. Usually, what happens previously, depending upon which century or which time period it was, the clinicians or scientists used to follow one single model. But now, today, in current times, we follow several different models to explain a particular behavior. Okay, so for example, during Sigmund Freud, psychoanalysis was, very, we can say, famous, and the clinicians, the scientists of that period used to follow psychoanalytical perspective. That was in the, forefront. But now, during current times in this 21st century, we clinicians or scientists or researchers, depending upon your field of study or what is it that you want to, like a client. So nowadays, it is more of an integrative perspective. So while treating a client, sometimes you will use certain techniques from psychoanalysis, few techniques from behaviorism, few techniques from cognitive psychology. Okay, so previously it used to be very strict. If a psychologist is influenced by Sigmund Freud, his treatment, his methodology, everything would be strictly psychoanalytic in nature. Okay, so today several models are used to explain and treat abnormal functioning. So first and foremost, the first model is biological perspective. So these models, as I told you, these models are used to explain abnormal behavior. How does an abnormal behavior occur? How it occurs? Okay, how it explains a behavior, particular behavior. So biological perspective, we also call it as a medical model. Okay, so a medical model, he say, according to this biological perspective medical model, abnormal behavior is rooted in diseases of the brain. Okay, so as the name itself suggests, medical model, biological perspective. So here, they don't really give place and importance on behavior or experiences or past experiences or thinking or everything. The emphasis is on whether something is wrong with the brain chemistry or brain anatomy. If there is some sort of a problem in brain structure, or if there is an injury, or if there is an imbalance in the chemicals of the brain, that will lead to abnormal behavior. And the psychiatrist, so the medicines which are given to people suffering from medical illness, I mean the mental illnesses, they actually follow this medical model. So the medicines are prescribed with the assumption that there is some imbalance in the chemistry of the brain. Okay. So these medicines are given to correct that imbalance. So according to this, see the medical model gained support in the late. Previously they used to think that illnesses were caused by uh, you know uh, evil spirits, uh, under the influence of some sort of a evil spirit. But then see what happened due to lot of scientific inquiry, experiments. They could find that if there is this abnormal behavior, has its basis. Did somebody say something? So they found that abnormal behavior has underlying basis of underlying biological. Somebody is speaking, and I request everyone to please mute their. Uh,
मुझे पता है लेकिन तेरे रूम में बीकर्स आएगा एक यूनिसेक्स आएगा एक नहीं कैसे आएगा तीन है
hello.
परेशान मत हो
Mr. Sukumar is speaking, ma'am. Sukumar.
Can you just ask him to mute his
तो मुझे पता ही नहीं था क्या करोगे
audio?
तीन राजा हेडफोन में
Okay. So medical model. So what it says basically is that in see what has happened was it gained a lot of support because of discovery of see what happened was syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease. Okay. So previously they thought that it is a type of Alzheimer, dementia, Alzheimer's. So, type of a dementia, and they thought like and it showed behavior similar to schizophrenia-like behavior. So they termed it as dementia precox. So, but then later they discovered that syphilis is not because it's not a type of dementia. Syphilis is caused by bacterial infection. Okay, so this discovery that that syphilis is caused by there is a cause led to a lot of support to biological model. Then later they discovered that Alzheimer's, the dementia, all these diseases which come under these old age diseases, dementia, delirium. So these diseases are because of this. There is that data discovery that it's because of there is some sort of an issue or problem in the brain. That also led further support to the medical model. Okay, so this medical model, this advancement in scientific inquiry led to major you can say advance of a demonology that they used to believe that evil spirits had taken control. So because all these discoveries one by one, syphilis infection, then finding out that dementia is caused because of illness in the brain. All this led to support of medical model. So biological model adopts a medical perspective. So main focus of is that psychological abnormal. So now we are going to talk about like how this biological model explains abnormal behavior. How is abnormal behavior caused, triggered? Okay. So main focus is that psychological abnormality or abnormal behavior is in illness brought about by malfunctioning of certain parts of an organism. And these parts are typically related to brain, that there is something wrong in the brain anatomy or brain chemistry. Okay. So now we don't have much time, and in 1 hour I have to cover a lot, and I have seen your book. So my PPT is a very detailed one. You don't need to learn so much about in this. So I'll be only talking about what is important under each and every model. Okay, because you'll be learning much more in depth in theories, I think. Okay, so brain anatomy. It's like, there is some sort of structural problem. If there is some sort of structural, and also researchers has found that, when they did post-mortem studies and studies under, and they scanned the areas of the brain, they found that, researchers have discovered that there are connections between certain psychological disorders and problems in certain specific areas of the brain. For example, Huntington's disease, it is a type of dementia, and they found that there is a relationship between Huntington disease and basal ganglia. Something going wrong with the basal ganglia or forebrain of a person's brain. And what is brain chemistry? Brain chemistry means, see, like, we have hormones in the body. Uh, are you all aware that we have hormones in the body?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
madam.
yes.
Yes. So if there is some imbalance in the hormone, what happens? It disturbs the functioning of a person's body. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you might have heard about thyroid. Lots of people are suffering from thyroid related issues nowadays. Every second, third person you will hear they are taking thyroid medicine, thyroxine. Yes. So these hormones are very, very important. They're very critical in the functioning of a person's body. So if there is, they have found that if there is some issue with the thyroid, that can also exhibit. So that is a separate issue altogether. But it's very interesting that if a person comes to us for consultation, if he or she is showing anxiety symptoms or depression symptoms, first thing which we ask is that person go for thyroid testing. Because see, usually you would expect the physical illness symptoms would be physical, but curiously, if a person is having imbalance in thyroid, so if a person has hypothyroidism, then the person will, rather than physical symptoms, he will or she will exhibit mental symptoms, like, he will show symptoms of depression. Okay. And if a person has hyperthyroid, so he or she will have heightened levels of anxiety. So it's not just that physical illness will show physical symptoms and mental illness will only show mental symptoms. Sometimes physical illnesses and their symptoms could be mental also, and sometimes mental illnesses can be triggered by imbalances in the body. Okay, so similar to hormones, we have some chemicals in our brain also, and those chemicals are called as neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters, one more name for neurotransmitters is we call them as chemical messengers. What are these? Different types of neurotransmitters are present. Like we have different types of hormones in our whole body. Similarly, we have different neurotransmitters in our brain. Okay, so what happens is that, see, we have neurons in our brain. Our brain is full of neurons, and the way we think, we act, we remember, we learn, our memory, our actions, our behavior, what all functions we our every cognitive function, every thinking, every type of function you name it, they are all these are carried out by these neurons, and there are billions and billions of neurons in our brain. So how these functions are carried out by one neuron communicating with another the other neuron, and these neurons, they communicate with each other through a process called action potential. So what happens, and they communicate. What happens? They communicate. See, they are not connected to each other. These neurons. Okay. So one neuron will communicate with another neuron by release of these neurotransmitters. So one neuron during this process called action potential will release a neurotransmitter, and the second neuron will absorb that neurotransmitter. Okay, and by this absorption, the messages are transmitted from one neuron to another neuron. So very critical, these neurotransmitters, they are chemical messengers. They carry messages from one neuron to another neuron. Okay, so if there is some imbalance, and there are different n number of neurons, I mean, there are different neurons in our brain. For example, serotonin, GABA, um, dopamine. These are some of the names of neurotransmitters. Okay. So these neurotransmitters are very important. If there is an imbalance in these neurotransmitters, any of the neurotransmitters, if there is an imbalance, so these proper messages are not being carried from one neuron to another, and which can trigger, abnormal behavior. Okay, so this brain chemistry which they are talking about is that if there is an imbalance in neurotransmitters, it can trigger mental illness. For example, in depression, has been linked to low levels of serotonin. Serotonin is, uh, you know, uh, a name of one of the neurotransmitters. Then we have dopamine, then we have GABA, then we have norepinephrine. These are different neurotransmitters. So they have found that depression is linked to low activity in serotonin and norepinephrine. Similarly, different neurons have been implicated with different levels of, abnormal levels, either sometimes see, like hormones, sometimes there can be a decrease in neurotransmitter level, or there could be an increase. Okay, so if there is no balance, then that can trigger different types of mental illnesses. So that is what we call as brain chemistry. Then we have genetic. Under biological model, we also have something called genetics. So we believe that, we genes are also responsible for us inheriting mental illnesses. If there is a family history of depression in the, I mean, if there is a family history, chances are the children might also inherit. Uh, they are predisposed to inheriting that mental illness. Or if there is a history of like mood disorder, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is the causes behind, they have found the loading, genetic loading is more in schizophrenia compared to other mental health illnesses. Okay, so, and it is, they have also found that it is polygenic, not just one gene which is responsible for causing schizophrenia. Polygenic, it is polygenic in nature. Like then different types of genes are collectively triggering schizophrenia in a person. Okay, so these several genes they combine to produce, trigger schizophrenia. So, genes contribute to mental illnesses. So, like we inherit physical illnesses. So, we hear that if there is a family history of diabetes, hypertension in the family, then chances you are much more vulnerable to having that illness. Similarly, if there is a family history of mental illness, then chances are that we will also inherit mental illnesses. And how does this happen? There could be some sort of mutations in the genes, and sometimes, like, we inherit that mutation in the family line. After mutation, we inherit that mutation in the family line. Okay, so it could be result of evolutionary principle also. We keep changing, organisms change as time passes. Okay, and viral infections have also been found to trigger mental illnesses. They have, if there is prenatal exposure to viral infection, they have found that, children born, they found that, in winters chances of getting viral infections is more, and they found that children with, prenatal exposure to prenatal viral exposure has been linked, implicated with schizophrenia. Okay. Then what are the type of treatments? Usually drug therapy, as I told you, under medical model or biological model, treatment is typically using uh, uh, psychotic or basically antipsychotic medicine, anti-anxiety medicine, depending upon whichever type of illness the person is suffering from, the person is prescribed that type of drug. And in severe cases, sometimes electroconvulsive therapy, that is ECT, is used. And if a person is resistant, drug resistant, ECT is not working, and the person is like, that is like this final, uh, psychosurgery is the last option. Usually, no doctor will opt for it, but sometimes, especially in rare cases of OCD, when the person's life is like uh, extremely difficult, sometimes in some rare cases, psychosurgery, where some part of the brain is removed, is used. Okay, then comes your psychological, under psychological perspective, we have psychodynamic. Psychodynamic model, the father of psychodynamic therapy or theory and psychoanalytical therapy is Sigmund Freud. And psychodynamic perspective is one of the oldest and most famous psychological model. It is one of the most oldest, I can even say the under psychological perspective or viewpoint. Psychodynamic is the first, the oldest and most famous model. Okay, and this model is based on belief that a person's behavior, whether normal or abnormal behavior, is determined largely by underlying dynamic, that is unconscious forces. The person sometimes is aware or sometimes is not consciously aware of these underlying forces. Okay, so which can result in conflict. Okay, so Freud has so psychoanalytical the theory developed by Freud is called a psychoanalysis, and he has said, like, he's the one who gave this concept of unconscious, conscious, and preconscious. What is conscious? Conscious is the part of our mind that we are aware of, the present. We are it is under our awareness. We are aware what is going on in our, see, mind is a huge, you can nobody can exactly know, basically measure the depth of the or the power of our mind. Okay, so conscious is the part of our mind we are aware of. Preconscious is the part of the mind whose contents lie outside of our awareness. We are not really aware of it, but if we focus our attention, if we concentrate, then that part of our mind can be brought into our awareness. Unconscious, according to Freud, it is a part of mind that lies outside range of ordinary awareness and contains our instinctual urges. This is a mind which, consists of, it consists of our drives, our urges, our desires. Okay, so this is what it is. The mind is like an iceberg. Only, in an ocean, if there is an iceberg which is floating, the upper part of the iceberg which we can see, that small bit of iceberg which you can see, is what we call it as conscious. And the lower, the largest part of our the iceberg which is submerged is consist of our preconscious and unconscious. And he is also given structure of personality. Are you all aware of ego and superego, all these concepts?
Yeah.
Okay, because in your book they have not really explained. Let me just see what is it that they have given. They medical model. So they have not really gone into depth. Okay, so I'll just briefly tell you about. I've already told you in depth, but again I'll just.
Ma'am, can we get this PPT?
No, this PPT is, I don't really get this PPT. Okay. So, structure of personality, you can just go on Google, or you can just go to your library at Ambedkar. These books are all there. Okay. Abnormal psychology books. Any of the abnormal psychology book will have this information in depth. Okay. So we have abnormal psychology books by Saracen, Barron, uh, Nevid. There are many authors. Any of the book, you don't even have, like, any book, whichever book you get access to, these thing is, all these concepts would be there. Okay, so Freud has given his theory of, I mean, this regarding structure of personality. Our personality is made up of id, ego, and superego. Id is the unconscious psychic structure present at birth and consists of our primitive instincts, and it is regulated by pleasure principle. Pleasure principle is like whatever it wants, whatever it desires, it wants it now, immediately. Okay, it will not wait for getting whatever it desires. It's completely focused on gratification of its needs. And ego is that the structure that corresponds to the concept of our self, and it is governed by reality principle. Okay, and it is characterized by ability to tolerate frustration. It will not tolerate frustration. It wants immediate gratification of its need. It cannot wait. But ego is guided by that ego is able to, that part of our personality which is able to tolerate frustration, and it is governed by based on reality principle. And superego is that part of our personality that consists of values, morals, ethics, which we have learned from our parents, from the culture and society we belong to. Okay, so this serves as our moral conscience. Okay, so superego serves as our conscience, our internal moral guardian, and it monitors the ego and passes judgment on what is right and wrong. So again, Freud has also talked about defense mechanism. Defense mechanism is like sometimes see, if a person experience some there is a conflict going on in a person's life, or if there is a conflict between id and superego, like even superego would be like if it wants something, immediately it wants gratification of needs, and then superego says no, it is not right, you cannot get it, you cannot do this. So if there is a conflict between id and superego, then ego, what it will do is it will use defense mechanism to be able to navigate through that conflict. Okay, so so in simple words you can say, like if something is happening in a person's life situation which can trigger, or the person will not be able to cope up with that situation, then ego will employ for a person to cope up with what is happening, something very drastic, very painful, if something is happening in that person's life, then the ego will employ this defense mechanism to help that person go about their daily business. Okay, so there are different types of defense mechanism: repression, displacement, denial. All this will be, I think, here you it will be able to cover in depth in your counseling theories paper. Denial, reaction formation, rationalization, projection, sublimation. So displacement, see, sometimes what happens, displacement is a type of defense mechanism where, for example, if you are shouted, here what the person will do is, if if he is in a weaker position at one area of his life, he will come and displays that frustration onto somebody else weaker in his life. For example, like if a person has been shouted upon by his or her boss, and then that person, what he or she will do, will while coming back to home, uh, I mean, not while coming back, after coming back home, the person will tend to displace that anger onto less threatening objects, such as shouting on the kids, shouting on the spouse. Okay, so displacing that anger from actually the real, from like the source where this anger belongs to, onto a less threatening source. Okay, denial is also another type of defense mechanism where the person refuses to recognize that something is going on in their life. For example, if a spouse is cheating, even if there are a lot of hints going on in the person's life, there are signs, the person will still deny, will be in denial that this is happening. Or parents, there are people are coming and talking about their child, like there are hints going on that the child is indulging in some sort of wrong behavior, or is into drugs, or is not studying, or something, like there are always signs and symptoms are there, but still the parents are in denial, no, our child cannot do this, he or she is not like that. Okay, so because see, the moment you stop denying and you start to acknowledge reality, then they will have to do something about it. Regarding the cheating spouse, the moment the person will stop denying and acknowledge the reality, then he or she will have to take a step. Okay, so that will create a lot of consequences. So to safeguard the ego, to safeguard the person from the consequences, will employ denial as a defense mechanism. Understood? So, like that, we have different types of defense mechanism which are being employed by uh, a person. So then Freud has also talked about developmental stages, and according to us, all of us go through a set of developmental stages, and if a person, and we have to navigate through these stages And if a person is successful while navigating these stages, there is a personal growth in the person. And if the person is unsuccessful, then he or she might get fixated in that early stage of development, which can later on lead to abnormality. Okay. So, according to Freud, he proposed five psychosexual stages of development. Oral is from first year of life. Oral is from birth to first year of life. Anal is second year of life. Phallic is beginning of the third year of life. Latency is from around 6 to 12 years of life, and genital is beginning of the puberty. So during oral stage, the the person, is only concerned with feeding. The child is only concerned with, and his erogenous zone is the mouth. Okay, everything the child is, you can see the pictures, whatever the child finds on the floor or anything anywhere, the child will put it into the mouth. Okay, so after this comes your anal stage. Here, the importance is learning toilet training is very important during anal stage. Okay, so here, if the person is unable to navigate through that stage, he might develop fixations, such as like OCD has been linked with a person getting fixated in anal stage. Oral stage, later on, smoking has been found. The person, people who smoke excessively, or who are smokers, it has been theorized that the person who are fixated in oral stage later on pick up smoking. And phallic stage is where the child, okay, um is here what happens during phallic stages, the child starts to identify with the parent of the opposite gender. So finds, gets attached to the opposite gender, but then fears the parent, same gender parent. So to navigate through that stage, they start to identify with their same gender. For example, girls would start to, girls are very much attached to fathers, and boys are very much attached to their mothers. But boys, because they fear consequences, like the punishment from the father, they will start to identify themselves with the father. Like you might have seen kids at this stage, they will imitate their father, how they shave, how they walk. And girls would imitate their mothers, they will walk in their mother's sandals, or apply lipsticks and all that. Okay, so that is what they do. And then latent is a stage where all these the development, this is a stage, latency, where things come to almost like a pause. And here, emphasis is placed on the child will start to socialize. Child will start to develop his socialization skills during, so 6 to 12 years are very critical for the social development of a child. Then comes puberty, and we all know what happens in puberty, the adolescent, the all those the different types of, the child suddenly starts to realize that there is something called an opposite gender, and starts to go through experience all those phases. Okay, so with this, so now what are the type of treatments which are used by psychoanalysis is pre-association. Here the say that usually say catharsis, free association. Free association is where the person is allowed to talk whatever he or she wants to talk with no interruption from the therapist. Okay, and therapist is basically goes into the background, and the client takes the center stage. And they find that, if a person is allowed to talk freely and talk about whatever comes to mind, he's unconscious, then he or she will feel a type of a catharsis, that is a release of frustration, and that can lead to, what you can say, uh, treatment. Basically, the person will start the reduction of his problems, psychological problems. Okay, and then behaviorism. Next model is behaviorism model. So the behaviorism is a school of psychology that defines psychology as the study of observable behavior. Okay, so behavioristic perspective is identified with Russian psychologist Pavlov. You might have heard about famous Pavlov's experiment with the dog. Okay, and the discovery of conditioned reflex is what is attributed to Pavlov. And American psychologist John B. Watson. He had done a lot of research, and he can even he is a considered to be father of behaviorism. Okay, and they believe, and then Skinner is also one of the foremost proponent of behaviorism. And all these Watson, Skinner, they believe that human behavior is product of our genetic inheritance and environment influences, our situation and environment influences. Okay, and they okay. So lot of information they are not covering so much. So they are like just two paras is what they are interested in, and we don't have much time also. So they focus on behaviors, behaviorism, focus on behaviors of responses and organism. So what the center point of behaviorism or behavioristic model is that they believe that our behaviors are maintained due to the response from the environment. That is, what are the consequences of behavior? If I do a certain behavior and I'm rewarded for it, then I will continue to maintain that behavior. Okay. And if because of some behavior there are negative consequences, and I experience something very negative, I am punished for it, then I will stop that behavior. That behavior will cease to exist because the consequence of the behavior has been very negative. So the response from the surroundings, what type of response you got from your surroundings, your environment, and what were the consequences of the behavior will decide whether a person will continue to maintain that behavior or whether the person will stop that behavior. Okay, so that is what behavioristic model believes in. Cognitive model, next model, cognitive model of behavior, abnormal psychology. They believe the emphasis is on perceptions. They believe that our thinking, our thoughts, it is not the situation, it is not what has happened to a person. It is how a person has interpreted what his thought about that situation, what his thinking was, how he interpreted, what his beliefs was regarding that situation will decide, will trigger that type of an emotion, and which in turn will trigger that type of a behavior. So I hope you understood. Like, for example, we always believe he did like this, she did like that, this happened to me, that is why I'm feeling like that. But cognitive theories, they don't believe that. They say like it is not the situation. It is not that this happened to me or this person said that to me. It is there is something called how I saw that event, what went on in my mind, my thinking, how I interpreted that situation. If I interpret the situation as something very wrong, something very bad for me, if my interpretation was negative, then it will trigger negative emotions. These negative emotions will in turn influence my behavior. So my behavior in turn will be negative. Okay. So cognitive theories, they believe that it is our perception and thoughts that will influence your moods and behavior, not the situation, not the environment. Okay. So cognitive behavior therapy is one of the most famous therapies, uh, which is being used and currently used very much used by psychotherapists, therapists, psychologists all over the world. And that therapy comes from this cognitive model. And here, what we do is we help the person to, become aware of his immediate automatic negative interpretations of event or situations, and make him like, understand that if you will just change the interpretation, okay, so we make him, restructure their perceptions, restructure their thinking. That in turn will help the person to reduce his abnormal behavior. Then comes humanistic model. Humanistic model is centered on the idea that uh, all of us have potential, okay, and all of us have potential to succeed in life, okay. And humanistic existential model is centered on the idea that people must successfully deal with, and to succeed, to reach that potential, you have to go through issues such as self-awareness, values, purpose, and there is a choice to be happy in life also. That is also a very curious thing, isn't it? We always believe that if he will do this thing, if she will do this thing, then I'll be happy. But what humanistic and existential model believes is that the choice to be happy is in our hand. Nobody can make us happy. We are responsible for our own happiness. So you have to choose that. Okay. So, and humanists, they believe that desire for actualization, that is to achieve your potential to self-actualize, drives people. And when and the abnormal behavior happens when this drive, this you can say this path towards self actualization, if it is disrupted, then uh, our abnormal behavior is observed. Okay. So client very famous therapy such as client centered therapy or person centered therapy, gestalt therapy, all these different type of therapies have come from this humanistic existential model. Now, socio-cultural model of abnormal psychology considers that there are three different types of external variables which are responsible for abnormal behavior. Okay, so sometimes we this model concentrates on social labels and roles, and certain people are labeled as mentally ill by society. Okay, and certain roles are being we have to conform to the roles which are being given to us by society. Okay, so sometimes some people also see the culture, socio-cultural system which we belong to. I hope I have this in this. Yes. So socio-cultural models argue that abnormal behavior is best understood in light of that the culture or social society the person belongs to, and you have in light of like understanding the understanding the impact of these social cultural forces on an individual. Okay, so and what are those impact? Like every society has its rules and norms. Okay, so, and it comprises of two perspectives, family social perspective, multicultural perspective. So they say like, the Rosenhan study, see, we label people like, we are very much, attracted to labels. A person is mentally ill, so we would like to label that person. Person has some sort of an illness. That labeling also is again, is not conducive for the person to become all right. Sometimes family structure the person comes from, sometimes the family systems theory, which comes under sociocultural perspective, argue that abnormal functioning within the family, if there are some dysfunction going on in the family, okay, then that can also trigger abnormal behavior in the children. Okay, so treatments are typically group therapy, family therapy, couples therapy, all these type of treatments have been given. And multicultural theories, they refer to set of values, attitudes, beliefs, history, and behavior shared by a group of people and communicated from one generation to the next. Okay, so if and this model holds that a person's behavior is best understood when examined in the light of that culture. This is what I covered yesterday also. So the type of culture you come from, if if a particular behavior is normal in that particular culture, then you cannot label it as abnormal. Okay, and if a person faces a lot of discrimination, prejudice in that culture, then the person will be much more prone to suffer mental illnesses. And also, like the society, the state, the socioeconomic status the person belongs to, it has also been found that more mental illnesses have been found, mental health problems are found in people belonging to low social economic status, because lot of prejudice, not enough opportunity, and even the stress, of being part of that particular uh, economic status can itself lead to a lot of mental health issues. Okay, so with this we have finished different models, okay, of abnormal behavior. Now I'm just left with 10 minutes. So fastly we will cover fastly we will cover classification of abnormal classification. What do you mean by classification? Any idea?
How many different types it has
Huh?
been? How many different types it has been? Like
Yes.
based on their behavior levels. How many types it has been?
Yes. So we need classification system has been used and is being used for everything, as isn't it? Like, be it you have feel your botany, then there is a classification system for plants. Animals, there is a classification system for the whole animal kingdom. And then similarly, we have a classification system for mental illnesses also. Okay, so why do we need a classification system? What is the need for having a classification system? So there are for us to I'll just start screen sharing. Wait a second. I think screen sharing is not on, I think.
Will be knowing the severity levels to whom we have to treat first based on
Hmm?
classification is for like based on the severity how we can treat them.
Similar qualities and similar dysfunction at one place. That is
Correct.
how the classification.
So
It will simplify.
classification system, when we are talking about mental illnesses,
Excuse me.
we have
It will
uh,
simplify the
huh?
classification. Will simplify the
Hmm?
total
Yes,
knowledge of that particular area.
correct. All of you are correct. So, so for our classification, the criteria which is used for our classification system in abnormal psychology is we are using signs and symptoms as the criteria for classifying different illnesses under different categories. Okay, so you know there will be your mental illnesses, and then under mental illnesses you will have psychotic disorders, and then neurotic disorders. Again, then under psychotic disorders, you have subcategories like that. So, mainly our classification systems are mainly, you know, they depend mainly on signs and symptoms. And according to signs and symptoms, the different set of mental illnesses have been clustered under particular category. That is the criteria which we use to classify mental illnesses or abnormal behavior. Okay, so rarely we use under again. See, compared to physical illnesses, for mental illnesses, we rarely use external validation. For example, like, mental illnesses, you have these blood tests, you have scans, you have lab tests, you have brain imaging. All of those tests are there. But for our mental illnesses, we depend upon signs and symptoms. Very, very rarely we would go for any lab test or brain imaging. So, as we are not dependent upon all these, clinical skills are very, 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 I cannot say it enough. Clinical skills are very essential when it comes to basically understanding mental illness. And when very critical aspect is uh, these we have different classification system, but you have to understand that you can read this classification system, but only a professional mental health professional is uh, trained enough to use this classification system to diagnose a person. Okay. So why we need to classify? What is the need to classify? Uh, because it introduces order and structure to our thinking and reduces the complexity of clinical phenomena. It leads to consensus also. See, and it introduces order and structure to our thinking. Like, we know, okay, these signs and symptoms. If a person is exhibiting these signs and symptoms, then he is showing signs and symptoms which come under anxiety disorders. So he is suffering from this. Okay, so it introduces or the mental illnesses, the signs and symptoms are not all over the place. So that is one of the reasons why we need to classify. And second is to distinguish one illness and diagnosis from another illness. It helps you to distinguish. It facilitates communication among clinicians about diagnosis, treatment, and programs. For example, I am sitting in India. If I get a prescription, or if I get, clinical, if I get prescription notes from a person from US or from UK, and the moment he is saying like, OCD, anxiety disorder, or borderline personality disorder, immediately I don't have to like, my understanding of borderline personality will not be different from his understanding because we are using same classification system. So immediately I know what that person is talking about. Okay, so these classification system will help with the it facilitates communication among clinicians about regarding diagnosis, treatment, prognosis. Prognosis means what is the outcome, and it helps to predict outcome also. So depending upon which mental illness the person is suffering from, and which category, which criteria the person which category the person belongs to, we also have, because of this classification system, we also have a tentative idea that what type of course the person's illness is going to take. Okay, we can even predict the outcome. Okay, so for example, a person suffering from uh, depression, sometimes there could be one episode, and or it can be multiple episodes also, but depending upon but then it can be episodic in nature. But schizophrenia, it will run a chronic course, like sometimes lifelong course. Okay, so it helps to predict outcome, and it often used to choose we also this classification system will help us to choose appropriate treatment also. Okay, because that classification system has lot of research backing information about it, which treatment will work, what is the outcome, and it ensures that clinical research can be conducted with comparable group of patients. Okay, it will help you to conduct your clinical research. You can have like a control group, experimental group. So how will you cluster a control group? How will you identify which is going to be a control group? Under control group, one group is going to be for experimental group, one group I'm going to select people belonging to schizophrenia, having schizophrenia. And so how will I decide who will have schizophrenia? I will use my classification system to identify persons showing these particular system, and then having those people in my research. So why to classify? I think I'm going to stop this here. I don't want it to be like yesterday where abruptly I was disconnected yesterday. So fast tomorrow in 5-10 minutes, because in 12 days class, at least for 3 days, I'll have to do two lessons for you people. Then only we'll be able to finish, because there are 15 lessons. And my problem is I tend to go in details. I tend to go like, your book is not covering in so much of depth, but I am going in detail. So, but we don't have much time. So tomorrow I will finish this classificatory system where we have to anybody can tell me what are the systems. There are two systems which are being followed by us around the world. Can somebody name what are those two systems? Classification systems. Any idea?
No idea.
No, ma'am.
No idea? Okay. So tomorrow I'll be speaking. There are two classification systems which are followed by us. Okay. One is ICD, International Classification of Diseases, and second system is DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Okay. These are the two important classification system when studying mental illnesses, abnormal behavior, which are being followed by us. Okay, so tomorrow fast I will be covering these, give you an information, an overview of these two systems, and I will also explain to you what are the similarities between these two systems, and what are the differences between these two systems, and what are these two systems. Okay. And hope to God, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I'll be able to finish, because this doesn't need much information. So I'll be able to finish these two systems in 10 minutes maximum, because I want to finish off your anxiety. I'll be starting your chapter on anxiety disorders tomorrow. So
Thank you,
if you can, if
ma'am. But
as
little
yeah,
fast. You're, I mean, like, sorry, I felt that you're a little faster than yesterday. Yeah, as you said, you have to complete 15 chapters in
yeah,
12
I
classes.
have to be, because yesterday you can
We were not.
understand. Yeah. So
No,
thing is that
our sincere request will be, rather than completing fast, you make us to understand even a limited changes. You can tell us the where you could not make complete. You can tell us to read those things. I think that will be more helpful for this group.
Actually, in the website, ma'am, like we got the soft copy material we had.
hmm,
It can give us the